Kind of funny, that tempted and tried. Every time I hear that song, when I was a kid, we was going to a flea market in Colorado, and there was a blind guy sitting on a 5-gallon bucket singing tempted and tried. And every time I hear that song, I can see that blind guy sitting on that bucket. Anyway, enough about me. Talk about Christ. The 5 discourses, we've been talking about that in Matthew. We call the 5 discourses, and we've started on the 5th, which we call the Olivet Discourse, which is the longest discourse that Jesus had. It's right before the crucifixion, and it's one of those we talked last time about. He talked about the destruction of Jerusalem, the end of times. Saw that verse shift in 36 where it says, "But of that day and hour no one knows." And then immediately following that, he goes into 2 parables, and those 2 parables, the evil slave and the 10 virgins, are 2 parables that Jesus used to illustrate that we don't know when he's coming and we need to be ready. You know, because he said in 36, he says, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not the angels in heaven or the Son, but the Father alone knows that day." So nobody knows that day. Nobody knows when Jesus is going to come again. Nobody knows when that's going to happen. There's no sign that's going to occur. We're not going to know. People say that all the time. It's bad as it's going to get. Jesus has got to come. I hear that all the time. It's not. It doesn't mean anything. Jesus said in the following discourse, as in the days of Noah will be the coming of the Son of Man. As in the days of Noah they're eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage, so shall it be in that day. You know, in other words, it's going to be a day, just like any other day. It's not going to be anything special about it. It's not going to be anything out of the ordinary about it. And Jesus is going to come. God's going to end it. And that's going to be it. And you know, I think sometimes we kind of get focused on that. And we kind of forget that, and we don't really think it's going to happen tomorrow. Do you really think it's going to happen tomorrow? Are you expecting it? I mean, you put that on your calendar? You know, nobody really thinks it's going to happen tomorrow, do they? Or the next day or the next year. I don't really think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I could be 100% wrong, but just being honest. But I really believe that my day's coming. I know that. My day's coming. And when that day comes, I need to be ready. I need to be ready to meet my Lord. And I think when you talk about these parables that Jesus says, it applies to that. Jesus talks about the evil slave, the slave who wasn't ready, right? If the head of the house had known what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert. He would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. I don't know how we miss this. I don't know how the world misses this. He's coming when we don't think he'll come, right? Coming when we don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a wonderful day. When we day you wake up, sun's going to come up, shine. It's going to be a great day, just like any other day. But it's not going to be like any other day. Who then is faithful and sensible slave, whom his master put in charge to give their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds doing when he comes. And he puts that parable in there to say that we should be that person that's doing the Father's business. Bondservant to God, bondservant to Christ. But he says the evil slave says, "My master's not coming," and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that slave will come on a day he does not expect him, an hour which he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place of the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You know, it's interesting how Jesus here talks about this punishment, doesn't he? This terrible punishment. Cut him in pieces and assign him with the hypocrites. There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. A terrible place, right? A place of punishment, a place that's reserved for those who don't follow Christ. We don't talk much about that in our society anymore, about hell, about the fear of hell, the fear of going to a place like that. But Jesus spoke about it all the time. All the time. I didn't put the whole parable of 10 virgins up here because it's pretty lengthy, and most of you know it. I just put up this last guy because this is a guy with the one, only one, right? Oh, this is 10 virgins. I'm sorry, not there yet. So the 10 virgins. So as we talk about these 10 virgins, they were waiting for this bridegroom. Jesus, of course, being the bridegroom that's going to come, and us being the ones that are waiting. 5 were foolish, the Bible says. 5 were prudent. 5 were waiting for that bridegroom, which is Jesus, to come, and 5 didn't. 5 didn't take oil with them because they thought he's going to come pretty quick. The people of Jesus' day thought he was coming pretty quick. He's going to come back in our lifetime, going to come back in our generation. Didn't Jesus say that this generation shall not pass until all these things take place? Not talking about the end of time, obviously, talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. So they're expecting him fast. They're not preparing. But according to this parable, the bridegroom was delaying, they slept, and then he showed up. And they said, the virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the prudent answered, there'll not be enough for us, for you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. And while they were going to make purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. You know, Jesus is saying here that when the bridegroom comes, there'll be no time to get right. That time is going to pass. There'll be no time to get right. No time to make it happen. It's going to be in an instant. It's going to be in an instant. And there'll be no time for us to prepare once that happens. You know, I talk to a lot of people sometimes, and they'll say, well, I sure want to get baptized. I sure like to be in the church, but I'm just so emotional right now, living my life. And said, you know, one of these days when I get settled down, I'm gonna get right. And a couple of them people I know never got that chance. They never made it that long. You know, the truth is that we have an obligation while it's today, while we have breath, while we have life, to obey the gospel. But the other virgins couldn't get in, could he? The Lord opened up, but he said, truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert, for you don't know the day or the hour, Jesus says. Be ready, right? And on the talents, it's just the last guy, the 1 talent guy. You all know the story. 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent. He went away, says use these. He came back. The one with 5 had 5 more. The one with 2 had 2 more. Talking about money here. Oftentimes we think talents, but I guess you can take it how you want. But this guy with the 1, he's the guy, isn't he? 1 talent. 3 different groups of people. One of them was probably very capable in this story. And maybe he received a bigger blessing, 5. One guy was maybe a little less capable, and he received 2. But I always think about the 1 talent guy. You know, he's the guy that Jesus said, or this master says, of course, Jesus being the master here, said, I'm just going to give you 1. And I think about that guy. You know, because maybe I'm a 1 talent guy, right? Maybe I'm just a 1 talent guy. And I think if you're a 1 talent guy, you're a little scared. Because you know you're not as smart as a 5 talent guy, and you know you're not as smart as a 2 talent guy. And he gives you this talent, which is still a lot of money, right? In this story, a talent's still a lot of money. He gives him this talent, and he says, I'm going to come back. What are you going to do with this? And you don't feel like you're a real capable person because you only got 1, right? I mean, he didn't even trust you to give you 5. You look at these other guys. This guy's got 5. This guy's got 2. It's like my whole life. I'm always on the end of the line, you know? It's just like when I was getting picked for sports. I was always the last guy, you know? And if there was an odd number of people, I was just on the bench, which was a good thing. And so, you know, the truth is I was always on the bottom, always on the end. My name was W. Every time they called names, I was always the last guy. There's nobody after W, you know, that was it. And so I was always on the bottom, and you only get this 1. And so you're kind of scared anyway because you're looking at these other guys that got these abilities, and you think, well, I don't really have that kind of ability, so I'm kind of scared anyway. And you think, well, I'm just going to take care of what I got. And yet Jesus said, you should have done something with it. You can't just hide it in the ground. Even if you only got 1 talent, you still ought to be able to do something with the 1 talent, with the 1 thing that you have. And I always think, Jesus, this is a story, right? This is the parable of the end, parable of the time. And Jesus comes back and he says, what did you do with the one? What did you do? What did you do with what I gave you? And you know, that's something that's been on my mind so hard lately. And really, it kind of started a couple weeks ago. And I really started thinking about this theory, this idea that I don't own anything. You know, it's kind of been this, and I kind of knew that my whole life, but it's like in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've kind of come to this place in my life that I'm just like, I don't own anything. You know, I don't own a thing. I'm just using it. It's not really mine. You know, and I don't really have any ability but what God gave me. And everything I have comes from God. And so, when you think about this guy, isn't that kind of what it is? I gave you something. I gave you this talent. You didn't have anything. I gave you this talent. I gave you something. And what did you do with what I gave you? What did you produce? And this guy said, oh, I didn't. I just saved it. I buried it in the ground. And here you go. Here's your one. And the master says, he says, you're wicked. Worthless. Not worth anything. You weren't worth much before, right? But now you're not worth anything. And that's scary to me because I think God's given me all these things to use because I don't own anything. God's given me all these things to use. And at the end of the day, all those things that God gave me in my life to use, my children, my wife, whatever it is that I live in, whatever it is that I enjoy, whatever it is that's my life, God has blessed me with this. And at the end of the day, when I face God, he's going to say, what did you do with all those things I gave you? That's kind of scary, isn't it? Because I think I'm so blessed. I'm on, on Facebook friends with some preachers in India and Africa and some other places, and I see their poverty, and I see their affliction, and I see the things that they need. And there's a preacher in India, and I was communicating with him, and I don't know how to help him. I really don't. It's very difficult. But he says, we only need 2 things, blankets and Bibles. And I'm like, I got a closet full of blankets. I got a bookshelf full of Bibles, right? And I'm thinking, my, how God has blessed me. And at the end, is God going to say, I blessed you so much. I put you in a country where you could preach my word. I put you in a land where you weren't persecuted for it. I gave you all these things to use, all these things to work with. What did you gain me? What did you gain me? I don't know. It's kind of sobering, isn't it? I don't mean to be a downer. This is just me thinking about me. What have you gave me for all those things I allowed you to use for all these years? And that's a sobering thought to me. So I wonder about this one talent guy. It kind of scares me a little bit because I wonder, did I bury mine? Have I buried mine in the ground? Has it become mine? Has it become my stuff, my life, my blessings, what I have? Is that how I look at it? What I've done instead of what God has done, what God has given me, what God has blessed me with? Because isn't it true that all blessings come from God? I think. And then Jesus immediately goes into the judgment, because this is close to the end. And in this Olivet Discourse, so we talked about the destruction of Jerusalem, we talk about the second coming of Christ. He says, be ready, you don't know when that's going to happen. Use what I gave you wisely. Be ready because I'm coming. Use your stuff wisely. And then he says, because you're going to be judged. Because I'm going to stand you all before the throne. I'm going to put you on 2 sides. We call it the sheep and goat judgment. I'm going to put you on 2 sides. I'm going to put the good on one side, the sheep, and the goats on the other side. The sheep on his right, the goats on the left. And the king will say to those on his right, come, you're blessed, my Father, inherit the kingdom. You know, Brent really likes this judgment because Brent says it's really interesting what you're judged for. And I thought a lot about what you said. I really have. But you know, it really goes back to really what God says the two greatest commandments are, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Doesn't it come back to those two commandments? Did you do with what I gave you? Look at what he just talked about. He said, I gave you all this stuff. I've blessed your life with all these things, and all these blessings come from me. Have you put it in the ground or have you used it? And then he says, how'd you use it? And then he says, I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we you sick or in prison and come to you? And he will also say to those on his left, depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire, which prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, you gave me nothing. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. Naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. And they will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you? And he will answer them, truly I say to you, to the extent you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. These will go away into eternal punishment. It's one of the very few times in the Bible, whether you know it or not, that the word eternal punishment is used. That word's hardly ever used in Scripture. This is one of the only times you see that word. You will go away into eternal punishment, he says, in eternal life. And it's one of the few times that comes up. You know, there's this Christmas carol, about the shoe guy. Y'all ever heard that Christmas carol? Where he says the Lord's going to come, and he made his store all good, and he got all ready for that special guest. And then there was a little child without shoes, and he took him in and made shoes, and he took him home, and a guy that needed something to eat. And so he fed him, and he took him home, and there was something else happened, I can't remember. And at the end of the day, he was upset. Conrad was upset. And Conrad went to pray, and he says, Lord, you said you would come today, and you never showed up, and I was all ready, and you never came. And he says, I was a child with no shoes to wear, the one with nothing to eat. And as much as you did it to the least of one of these, you did it to me. That song always has meant a lot to me, because I think that sometimes in life, we think I've only got one talent. You know, you got to tie it back into this. What can I do? I've only got one talent. Can you feed somebody? Can you visit somebody? Can you clothe somebody? You know, Jesus sometimes doesn't want us to do the biggest things on earth. Sometimes he just wants us to do the things that matter to the people to whom it matters the most. You ever thought about that? You know, maybe Jesus doesn't want us to prepare the greatest feast and banquet for all the great faithful people to come and eat. Maybe he would rather that we give a sandwich to somebody on the street that's really hungry. And maybe he doesn't want us always to dress in the best clothes. Maybe he would rather we have somebody else give them clothes to wear. Jesus, Paul says, and this sticks with me, maybe it will stick with you. Paul says that Jesus wants our reasonable service, doesn't he? Not our unreasonable service. He just wants our reasonable service. And in my life, that's what I want to give him. I want to give him my reasonable service. It's reasonable for me to be at worship 3 times a week. I'm not punishing anybody that doesn't do that. But you know what? That's reasonable to me. To give the Lord 3 hours of my week, 4 hours of my week in worship, in study with you, that's reasonable. It's reasonable for me to give money to the church. It's reasonable for me to give money to a food bank. It's reasonable for me to help where I can help, to clothe people who need clothes and feed people who need feeds, and let people have some of the blessings that God has so richly blessed me with. It's reasonable service. Things that we can do, things that all of us can do. Isn't that what he's talking about? And as much as you did it to the least of these, Jesus says, you did it to me. I think it's an amazing discourse, isn't it? It's something that should give us hope that even if I don't have much, I can be a blessing to people around me who don't have anything. And if I have a lot, I can be a real blessing to people around me who don't have much. The truth is that Jesus expects us to love our neighbor as ourselves. He expects us to love him with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, with all our strength. And you're here tonight. You could be someplace else. You could be sitting in front of a TV. You could be playing a game. You could be relaxing in your recliner, but you're here. You're reasonable service. To me, that's what it is. It's putting God in our lives in a reasonable way, honoring him with what we have, with what he's given us, and honoring him by how we use what he's given us. To me, that's what Christianity, that's what being a disciple of Jesus is all about. It's not about building great monuments or great statues or doing huge things or having huge programs. Being a true follower of Christ is taking care of the least of these with the blessings that he's given us. And to me, that's what I get out of this. And I hope maybe you do too. If we can help you in any way this evening, won't you let it be known while we stand and sing.